Hello, hello. Welcome to the Two Decades Deep podcast. Ew. I don't know why I said it like that. I'm still trying to find my voice, y'all, in this podcasting industry. I just started not even a year ago. And so I'm trying to figure out the most engaging and captivating way to open up my episodes. But that wasn't it. So I never do that again. But I'm so glad to have you all here. This is a podcast on 20 somethings. So whether you're going through a relationship ending, you're starting or ending college, starting post grad life, figuring out your next, resetting, all the things that we go through in our 20s, we're going to talk about it right here. And whether you're tuning in on YouTube or you're listening in on Spotify, I am so happy to have you all a part of the Two Decades Deep family. I'm really glad that I have this opportunity to sit down, kiki with y'all. It's been a while since I've done a solo episode. I've only done one so far, and so much has changed. And boy, do we have a lot to catch up on. So this episode is about resetting, and a lot of 20 somethings are very keen to this. And if you're in your early 20s and haven't completely reset yet, buckle up because this decade is all about transition after transition after transition. And I was hesitant to even do this episode because I'm currently in a huge transition right now and I'm resetting. And honestly, I wanted to come and do this episode on resetting once I was done. I wanted to come from like my older and wiser self and give you all these gems on how to reset and this, that, and the third. But I'm still in the thick of it. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to talk about what I'm currently doing because I think a lot of people in general talk about experiences from a sense of like what they did and like their past, but I'm coming from it very raw and telling you all about what I'm currently going through. And I do have a couple disclaimers before I go into everything that I want to talk to y'all about. I am looking at resetting from this type of mindset, sacrificing for the greater later. And that's something that my mom actually talks about. If you know Mama Ange, you know that that's her mantra. And so when I'm talking about resetting, I do want to look at it from this mindset. And essentially what that means is the things that you're doing right now, the disciplines that you're instilling in your day to day, this is ultimately going to benefit you in the future. And so temporary sacrifices for long-term gain. And that's the type of mindset that I'm going to be having today. I also want to acknowledge that while I'm talking about a financial reset, there are several ways to reset, right? Like when you get out of a breakup, or once you graduate college, or if you're going through a spiritual journey and you want to do a spiritual reset. Like there's several different ways to reset. But I do think that what I'm talking about is very applicable to any type of reset. I also want to talk about how resetting can be overwhelming, whether you're welcoming resetting or you're dreading resetting and you feel like you have no choice to reset. It can be an overwhelming time. And I also think that, at least for me, I was really embarrassed about it. I was looking at people on social media. I was feeling like, okay, there's this 20-year-old, respectfully, there's this 20-year-old that is buying a home, and I'm 27 and I had to move back with my mama. And it was embarrassing, but it felt embarrassing, I'll say. And I was embarrassed, but you realize that, like, a lot more people do it than you think. I looked up an article on Pew Research, and 57% of Americans from 18 to 24 live with their parents, like, they've never moved out. And while the age range from 28 to 34 significantly declines, you'd be surprised how many people still live with their parents or move back in with their parents. So I do think that I just wanna normalize the fact that, like, this happens all the time. And like I said, whether you're resetting from a financial standpoint or you just got out of a relationship or you just need people around you to reset on your mental health, like, all this is okay and it's a part of life. So let me give y'all the tea. It's so crazy how your life can change in a matter of seconds. in a matter of days. It's so crazy how information is brought to you and it can change your whole trajectory of what you think you were supposed to be doing. To give you all context, I moved from Chicago suburbs. I feel like I had to make the disclaimer because if you are a person from Chicago and you tell them you're from Chicago, they're gonna be like, "What side?" And then I'll say South Side, and they're like, "What part of South Side?" And then I end up saying the suburbs. So I'm from the South suburbs. So anyway, I lived in the South suburbs and I felt like it was time for me to start over. I just graduated from my master's program and I thought that it was time for a shift and for a change. So my family, they live in the DMV and they told me, why not come out here for a little bit and figure your life out? And so that's exactly what I did. I have lived in the DMV since March of 2022. And I lived with family for about a year and a half till I got on my feet. And then I moved to DC in August of 2023. And from August of 2023 to, I would say, March of 2024, I was like in living my best life. I found my core group and I was struggling to find friends when I first moved here. So now I have my core group. I was working my two jobs. I felt like the absolute ish, like big girl bossing, Miss Independent. And I don't know, I just felt really good. So then, March of 2024, excuse me, I start the podcast. And full transparency, I'm self-funding this. And so I have the podcast. I'm also paying all my bills. I'm paying my rent. I live in a very expensive, like DC is a very expensive city. So I was starting to notice that I was living paycheck to paycheck. And you're probably like, girl, you didn't realize that before. I mean, I did, but I felt like with starting the podcast, I also realized like, oh shoot, like I'm not seeing my money for real. Around May of 2024, it was getting to a point where I felt like I wasn't able to keep up with my bills. Full transparency also, I wasn't the best with my money, so like I would choose a happy hour over eating at home. And I would choose sometimes my social life or I would purchase something knowing I probably didn't have it all, but it is what it is, y'all. And I was getting to a point though where I felt like I literally don't have the money. It got so bad I started working, well, I worked two jobs anyway. I was picking up shifts. I was door dashing. And I even started, I don't know if you are familiar with like those loan sites. So like on your smartphone, you can download an app like Empower or Albert, and they're like instant loan apps where you can like borrow $200 and then you have to repay it back when you get your next paycheck. And if you don't take anything else from this episode, take this. Please do not download those apps for instant money unless you really need it. Like it's there for you, but you get into this vicious cycle of always owing these apps, and then it would eat away my paycheck, and then I would be in a deficit. And so it just got into a vicious cycle. I was struggling, and I had so much pride because I wanted to be perceived as someone who had it together. I didn't even tell my mom. I didn't even tell anybody. But I got to a point, like, probably around June, like, a month later, June of 2024, where I was like, "Yeah, I literally can't do this anymore. Like, it's getting ridiculous." And so I told my mom, I didn't tell her everything, but I told her, I was like, "Hey, yeah, like, I think that I like, it's like, this is too expensive. Living here is too expensive. I don't wanna leave DC, but I do recognize that, like, I can't afford it." And then so I was like, "My lease ends in August. It ends in a couple months anyway. I might as well just, like, finish up my season here in DC." And so my mom was like, "Well, why don't you reset? Come home for about 6 months." She gave me, like, a 6-month time period, "and then figure out your next." And so I I heard her, but I felt like, "Dang, like, it's just it, huh? So I'm just gonna have to, like, finish my season in DC prematurely and I have to go home. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I was spiraling, legit spiraling. Because I think when you think that where you should be in life and when your actions and your current situations are not matching with what you thought you were going where you thought you were going to be at a certain point in your life, it can be devastating and it can be grieving. And it seems like I'm being dramatic, but I was legit spiraling. Like, imagine thinking that your life was going to go a certain way and it's kind of the exact opposite. And whether or not I do think that there's decisions that I could have probably done, such as probably not moving out of my family's house in Maryland so early, sometimes you just gotta learn when you're in it. And so I was like, okay, fine. I'm gonna move. I'm gonna reset. In July of 2024, unfortunately, the family that I lived with, well, my family, I'm acting like they're not my family that I lived with prior to getting my own apartment, one of the family members passed away. And it was such a devastating experience. And in that process, I made the other family members that lived in this house still aware that I was moving and that I was going back to Chicago, and it's also very vulnerable, and I felt really embarrassed to, like, admit, like, "Yeah, I dropped the ball on my finances." And they also offered, like, "Oh, why don't you just stay here? Like, you can have a extra couple months to figure out your next, and you don't have to completely move back to Chicago." And I took him up on that offer, and I'm, like, so appreciative that I was able to finish up my time in DC. And I remember after that feeling so grateful, and I still am grateful, but I was telling my therapist that I cannot believe I have to reset. And I was being a victim. I was like, "I cannot believe this. Like, I'm such a loser. I have to reset. I have to give up my apartment." And then my therapist was like, Girl, you are choosing to reset, right?" Like, she's like, "You have the choice, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "You could stay in this situation, right? Like, you could keep repeating this behavior, this cycle of, like, you being paycheck to paycheck, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then she's like, "Okay, this is a decision that you're making for yourself. You are temporarily sacrificing so you won't be in the situation again. And you have the opportunity. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to go back home, to have family members to help them and support them." And I'm really glad that she got me together because I think sometimes when I am in situations, it's kind of hard to see that, like, this is such a unique opportunity that I have to be able to move back home. And I really do sympathize with people who don't have that opportunity to move back home. And so that brings me to my first point about changing your perception on your current situation. So I have to actively do this still. I have to remind myself I get to have to financially reset so I can get my dream apartment or potentially get a condo or whatever I wanna do next. And it gives me so much relief mentally because my mental health was suffering because of my financial situation. I'm able to do that. And so I think having a perspective shift makes all the difference, and it really does help you stay encouraged and keeps you grounded in what you're currently going through. I almost see it as a act of self-love that you are able to have a discipline and stand on business to ultimately jumpstart you in your next. And so I think my perspective, like constantly remembering that, makes all the difference. So the second thing I did was creating a plan. And I do want to make a disclaimer that I don't have like a timeline plan in the sense of like in 8 months, I'm going to move out. But I do have like, okay, this is the amount of money that I feel like would make me feel comfortable to move out again. So with that, I created a budget. And so every paycheck, I put money up for an apartment. I also recognized that when I was living by myself, I had no emergency funding. Like if something were to have happened, and thank God nothing did, I would have been SOL for real, because I wouldn't have been able to afford it because I was literally going to the 0 every time. So not only do I have savings for my apartment, I also have savings for emergency funds. So whatever will happen, I know that I have money that's accounted for that. I also created a plan. Okay, so while I'm figuring it out, I am going to go back and forth from Chicago to DC. I have a podcast, clearly, and there's a lot of support that I have in Chicago. And obviously, like my mom lives in Chicago, so I've been home a lot. I also have been traveling a lot for work and going like back and forth. And then I'm still in DC because I wanted to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row before I ultimately decided to move back to Chicago for good. Um, and so I am like, okay, in January of 2025, I will be out of DC, but my plan to like make sure that I find a therapist in Chicago, making sure that I close the chapter here and seeing my friends and hanging out with family and doing all the things that I need to do prior to leaving. And so that was my plan, like, because it was a financial plan, I just had, like, financial goals with that. But then from there, which brings me to my 3rd point, is creating a system that works for you. If you know me, you know I thrive on routine. I have to have my morning routine and my night routine, like, those are my non-negotiables. And so I made sure that, okay, no matter where I am, I need to make sure that I am able to have a morning and nighttime routine. And my morning routine consists of my devotion, going to the gym, um, eating breakfast, getting ready for the day. And that's a very like basic routine, but I make sure that no matter if I'm in the DC area or the Chicagoland area, I am going to keep that routine. And then lastly, what I do is I make sure that when I moved back in with my cousin and when I moved back with my mom, I made sure that there were expectations, there was boundaries. I'm in a house, right? So like I made sure that I was being respectful of their place. Like I wasn't keeping it a mess. I really do try to respect other people's spaces because it's not my space. But at the same time, because I am in this space, I'm a 27-year-old grown woman, I do make sure that I live my life in the process, right? So I think wherever you're resetting or whenever you choose to go back, whether you're going back home, you're living with a coworker, you're living with a friend, create those boundaries and expectations up front so that way there's no gray area and you know exactly how you're going to navigate living in someone else's space for a while. Now, I have found so many benefits to resetting that I never thought I would. And I think the biggest benefit, you have an opportunity to get all your ducks in a row. And what's applicable, I think, to any reset is that you have the opportunity to kind of slow down a little bit. I think life is so busy, but when you're resetting, there's like an intentional way to like process everything and go through everything and really just sit in your emotions. And so I think that the biggest benefit is that the opportunity to pause, an opportunity to reflect and realize, okay, what worked? What didn't? What do I want to apply into my future season? Another big benefit to resetting is usually it's in community. It's usually not in isolation, resetting. And so I realized like, wow, I have an opportunity to be with my mom and my dad and my brother and my childhood dog. And I don't know if I'll ever have this time, this intimate time again with them. Like obviously they're still my family, but life be life in. And life is so short. And so I'm really grateful for the fact that I'm able to be with them. I'm able to, spend this intimate time with them because when I get an apartment, like, this might be the last time well, hopefully, this is the last time that I'll be moving out for good, and so there's another benefit there, and then lastly and I have not done this as much as I should have, but you get to invest in yourself in a different way, and for financial reset purposes, whether even if you're paying at a discounted rate, like it's not a guarantee, right? When you move back home or you move in with a friend that you're just going to be rent free. But even if you're living with them at a discounted rate, there is an opportunity that you might have some extra stash and extra cash, and you can invest in a hobby. Like there are hella. Ooh, sorry, mom. My mom watches this podcast. There are hecka hobbies that you are able to invest in. And I used to do salsa classes. And when I moved back to Chicago for good, I might want to pick that back up. I've always wanted to try improv, and I have the extra cash right now to do so. And so you have an opportunity to invest in yourself, in your personal development. Maybe you can take on some extra classes for that. There's so many things that you can do and you can invest in while you are resetting. And I'm trying to I'm not trying to glorify resetting because it usually does come with like this isn't like, "Oh my god, life is just so great and like resetting is just the best." Like there are challenges that I face, and there are times where I'm like, "Dang, if I just had my own apartment, I wouldn't have to do this." Or I'm like, dang, I like being by myself. So sometimes I'm just like, I just want to be alone. However, I do want to just emphasize that sometimes, like, not everything is as bad as it seems. And so just appreciating the now and just being more present and in the moment, I think has been a game changer for me. You really are making a decision for yourself that is really going to jumpstart you in your season. And so I'm proud of you. So whether you're thinking about resetting, like take this as a sign to reset and to start over. You are on your own individual journey. You shouldn't and I'm saying you should not be comparing yourself because I'm talking to myself right now. Like if there was a mirror, I would be like, girl, like trying to convince myself of this too. But we are on our own individual journeys, and it's easy to get caught up of what things look like or the conversations you're having with your peers and they're getting this and they're getting that and you just feel like, dang, but I got to move up with my mama. That is okay because the things that you're doing for yourself is only going to benefit you in the future. And yeah, I just really wanted to acknowledge that because I think that yeah, it could just be really hard. I'm being the dead horse. I've said the same thing 15 times. So just trust that the decisions that you're making are best for you. It's crazy as I close this episode out as a 27-year-old, it has been really crazy to navigate through these seasons. As this season in my life is wrapping up in DC, and I'm kind of sad because I do feel like, in a way, I felt like it ended prematurely. I also trust life's pushes for you to move forward. Like, I am a firm believer that life will very much reveal when it's time for you to transition and make a change. And don't fight that. Don't fight life's pushes for you because it's trying to propel you in a different direction. And I'm a Christian. And I really do believe that God was pushing me out to start a different season in my life. And I probably noticed more signs now that I'm thinking about it of like, it might have been time for me to leave DC. And I'm not saying like, oh, my finances just plummeted because God was pushing me to my next. I did that. I did that. Like that TikTok, like I did it. Is that a TikTok? Or did I make that up? Anyway, sorry. My mind went somewhere else. Trust the reroutes, trust the process, reset, do what's best for you. We got this. We're in this together and we're going to figure it out. I can't even tell you. I would love, like I said, at the beginning of this, I said that I would have loved to have sat here and been like, and now I got my dream apartment, and now I'm doing this, and I saved this amount of money, and I still am not at the goal that I thought I would be in when I moved out. And it's okay. Like, it is literally okay that I'm not exactly where I thought I was going to be. But as long as I'm making intentional steps to that goal, that's all that matters. And so to close out, I talked about the benefits of resetting. The biggest ways to reset are creating a plan, well, changing your mindset, creating a plan, creating a system that works for you while you're resetting, and then also having expectations and boundaries in the process. There are so many benefits to resetting. It is spending time with your family, being able to have some financial cushion, and also investing in yourself and investing in your personal development. I'm just trusting that the way life pans out is the way it's supposed to be. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's podcast. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We are a community and we are trying to stick together and navigate through these ways together. Ooh, my leg is falling asleep, so I think that is a sign that this episode is over. If you have ever resetted or you in the process of resetting, please drop low drop below in the comments on ways that you all have resetted. And as always, we are uncovering who we are one chapter at a time, and we're unfolding at our own pace, and we are exactly where we need to be. Take care, y'all.